3 years ago, my life was completely different. Back then, Emily and I were deeply immersed in Boston's vibrant art scene. We weren't pretentious about it. At least I'd like to think we weren't. We simply had a genuine passion for all forms of art, from Renaissance masterpieces to contemporary installations. Our brownstone in Beacon Hill was adorned with carefully curated pieces we'd collected over the years. Every month, sometimes even more frequently, we made it a point to visit exhibitions and museums. As active members of Boston's two most prestigious galleries, we never missed a vernissage or gala evening. We'd even fly to New York or Washington for special exhibitions that caught our interest. Over our 8 years of marriage, Emily and I had built a solid circle of friends who shared our love for art. While we had other interests in different social groups, our art community friends were the ones we felt closest to. Well, except for one person, James's second wife, Sarah. For James's sake, I tried my best to get along with Sarah, but it wasn't easy. She came across as unsophisticated, seemed indifferent to classical masterpieces, and often made dismissive comments about pieces the rest of us found fascinating. Our group frequently wondered how James could tolerate her apparent lack of cultural refinement. But there was one topic we never discussed: why he married her. Sarah was undeniably attractive, like a warm summer breeze on a cold New England day. Though her face was just above average, there was something magnetic about her presence. She usually dressed conservatively, but there was an underlying allure that was hard to ignore. By the time this story began, it was clear James's patience with her simplicity had worn thin. Despite her appealing looks, he frequently criticized her in public, creating uncomfortable situations that required my professional intervention. As a conflict mediator specializing in corporate disputes, I often found myself applying my work skills to personal situations. However, when it came to James and Sarah, my peacekeeping efforts, though successful, were never acknowledged by either of them. The rest of our social circle always showed appreciation for my diplomatic skills, but not those two. Despite my reservations about Sarah, I maintained a courteous relationship with her. She reciprocated during our few one-on-one encounters, which were rare and usually brief. I'd known Sarah for about 3 years when everything changed. The Gardner Museum was celebrating its 50th anniversary with an exclusive exhibition of contemporary art. The event promised to be the social highlight of the season, featuring pieces from renowned artists worldwide. The museum was also famous for its exceptional catering at every event, and this one promised to be their finest yet. I was particularly looking forward to attending with Emily. About a week before the event, Sarah called Emile. Why? Clearly emotional. James was scheduled to be out of town for work, and for some reason, Sarah was desperate to attend. Emily later told me that Sarah had caught her off guard with an unexpected statement. I know most people in your circle probably see me as simple and boring, Sarah had said, but I'm really trying to fit in. You and Nathan have always been the most understanding. Could I possibly join you too? Of course, Emily had replied, though she sounded uncertain. Sarah was apparently thrilled by the response. When Emily told me about the conversation, she wore a slightly apologetic expression. That was Sarah on the phone, she said. James will be out of town for the anniversary celebration, and she asked if she could come with us. I couldn't say no. I groaned. Great. I think I'll need a stiff drink to get through this evening. Don't be so dramatic, Emily chuckled. She was actually very nice and mentioned she's trying hard to fit in and learn more about art. Maybe we should embrace being her art mentors, I said sarcastically, raising an eyebrow. Behave yourself, Emily laughed, playfully nudging my side. I was starting to accept the idea that Emily and I would take turns entertaining Sarah at the gala. Then, a few days later, another surprise came my way. Nathan, darling, Emily called out to me. Whenever she used darling, I knew something was coming that I wouldn't like. What now? I responded, not hiding my irritation. You know how much I've been looking forward to the celebration, but something urgent came up at work. To advance my career, I really need to be out of town from Wednesday morning until late Friday evening. I'm so sorry, she said, tracing her finger gently across my chest. The first thing that crossed my mind was a question I couldn't hold back. Is Mark Stevens going on this trip? I asked, my displeasure evident. Yes, along with 2 other colleagues, she replied, sounding defensive. Then, as if trying to lighten the mood, she added with a joking tone that didn't amuse me, why are you always so worried about him? Because, to put it bluntly, and I hope it's just my imagination, he's always hovering around you, I said firmly. Oh, Nathan, you're totally misinterpreting things, Emily insisted. Why does he always try to slow dance with you at every company event? Or how about that time we saw him and his supposed girlfriend at the Liberty Lounge? How did he know we were going to be there? We've gone over this before, she said, sounding annoyed. It was just a coincidence, and besides, he dances with other women too. Just faster dances. And let's not forget his comment last time when I mentioned I only slow dance with you. I muttered. He was just joking, she scoffed. Well, I didn't find it funny. I shot back. Oh, honey, don't be jealous, she said, trying to soothe me. You know you're way better looking than he is. I didn't think I looked better, and I knew I could easily put him in his place if it came to that. But I also knew that women, and Emily in particular, didn't view looks the same way men did. Her last boyfriend before we got married bore a strong resemblance to Mark. She had been head over heels for him until he foolishly let her go. Still feeling miffed? I asked. Do you really have to go on this trip? Yes, sweetheart, I do. You can call Richard if you want to check, she replied, still stroking my chest. Richard was the CEO of her company, and someone I knew to be straightforward and honest. I was still grumbling when Emily wrapped her arms around me. Then a new concern hit me. I gently pushed Emily back to arm's length and blurted out. So are you going to call Sarah and tell her she can't come since you won't be there? Why would I do that? Emily asked, looking confused. You're still going, aren't you? She can still go with you. I was counting on you to help handle her endless questions and unpredictable behavior. Now I have to deal with her on my own. I grumbled. Our other friends will be there. Be a gentleman, Nathan. Like I said, she's making an effort to fit in. It might even be fun. Yeah, probably, I groaned. You'll be nursing a drink the whole time, won't you? Emily chuckled. Let me help ease those nerves of yours, she added, massaging my shoulders. I knew she was teasing, but since I figured everything would turn out okay, I played along. Once we'd both relaxed, I scooped her up in my arms, carried her to the shower, and after some playful splashing and giggling, brought her to bed. It wasn't easy for me to fall asleep that night. I was still upset about her business trip with Mark and the fact that I'd be stuck dealing with Sarah on my own. I was pretty sure our friends wouldn't be much help. Eventually, I drifted off into a restless sleep. I was so anxious that 2 days later, I finally gave Richard a call. I knew him fairly well from my work with the company and had even played doubles tennis with him when his usual partner couldn't make it to the country club tournaments. I try not to come across as too nosy or obvious. I think I managed to pull it off by starting the conversation with a question about getting tickets to the next match of the Boston Tennis Classic. He confirmed that Emily really did need to go, but that only she and Mark were going. No one else. However, this decision was made pretty recently, so maybe she wasn't lying. I was still bothered, though. That Tuesday night before her trip, I made sure to wear Emily out until she was completely exhausted. The next morning, she made a few complaints, but they sounded more playful than serious. So I decided to push down my anxiety about her spending 2 nights alone with Mark. But then I had another issue to deal with. I had to take Sarah to the gala myself. I called her around noon on Wednesday, half hoping I could find an excuse to back out. Even though I'd already decided I'd go, she was so excited about it that I would have felt like a total jerk if I canceled. I'm really looking forward to seeing the exhibition with someone who doesn't constantly put me down like James does, she blurted out at one point. I braced myself for a challenging evening, but promised myself I'd make the best of it. For the event, I was dressed in a formal suit, so when I went to pick Sarah up, I was wearing my best tuxedo. She stepped out wearing an elegant floor-length electric blue dress. It was strapless, sleeveless, with an open back and bare shoulders, and a slit that ran nearly up to her thigh on the left side. She had a stunning sapphire necklace around her neck and a subtle sapphire bracelet on her left wrist. "You look fantastic," I said sincerely, helping her drape a pashmina over her shoulders as we headed to the museum. "Thanks. You're the best-looking penguin I've ever seen," she grinned back. The small talk on the drive to the gallery felt a bit awkward. But once we arrived, had some appetizers, and downed a couple of generous glasses of wine, the conversation started to flow more easily. As we toured the exhibition, Sarah peppered me with questions and comments. She didn't seem particularly taken with the early works, but her observations were surprisingly thoughtful. I found myself enjoying the role of explaining the various pieces and their significance. Rather than being silly or crude, most of her comments were either humorous or insightful. Some were even pretty perceptive, and that's saying something considering I had already poured her a fourth glass of wine. We mingled with some of our friends, and it turned out to be a really enjoyable conversation. Sarah joined in enthusiastically, even winking at me every time she echoed one of my remarks. By around 9:30 p.m., people began to head out. Sarah excused herself to powder her nose, and I found a quiet spot to call Emily on my cell. Using a phone in the museum isn't exactly encouraged, if not outright forbidden, so I had to keep out of sight. Well, I tried to call Emily, but my call went straight to voicemail. I left a cheerful message letting her know the evening was actually going well and not the disaster I had feared. I asked her to call me whenever she could. On the way home, it became clear that Sarah had had a bit too much to drink, though she wasn't so far gone that she couldn't keep her composure. I was taken aback when she made an unexpected comment. "I don't think I've ever mentioned this before, Nathan, but I really need to thank you for all the times you've helped me out of those awkward situations when James would make those humiliating remarks. I truly appreciate it," she said, giving my bicep a squeeze when she finished. "I hope I was able to help," I muttered, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. She went on earnestly, "I also want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being so kind to me tonight. I bet you were dreading it, but I hope it wasn't too awful for you." I fumbled a bit as I replied, "Actually, I had a good time tonight. I hope you did too." Just then, the headlights of a passing car caught her blue eyes and sapphire necklace at the same time. It was a breathtaking sight. "I had a wonderful time," she said brightly, flashing a big smile. When we arrived at her place, she took my right hand and casually asked, "Would you like to see some of my personal art collection? I have pieces that might surprise you." It was a little after 10 p.m., and I never went to bed before midnight, even on weeknights. "Sure," I replied, getting out to open her door. As I helped her out of the car, the slit in her dress parted, revealing more of her left thigh. It was more enticing than I had noticed in my earlier glimpses. I helped her with the keys as she unlocked the door. She closed the curtains in her living room and excused herself. "I need to make a quick stop before I show you my collection," she smiled. "Can I get you something to drink?" "I think I've had enough of the party," I replied. "I should probably head home soon anyway." "Oh, don't worry. You'll be perfectly sober by the time you leave. If you change your mind, the bar is over there," she said, pointing to a small bar between the living room and the kitchen. "I'll be back in just a minute," she added, and then disappeared somewhere deeper into the house. I wandered around the living room, taking in the paintings on the walls. I decided to try calling Emily's cell again. It went straight to voicemail once more. I left a brief message. "Give me a call back." I felt a bit uneasy but shrugged it off and continued examining the artwork on the walls. I'd only been to James's house once before, back when he was still married to his first wife. It seemed like most of the pieces had changed since then. Some of them were nice enough, but none really captivated me. Maybe she's grabbing a painting or sculpture from her bedroom, I thought as I continued to look around at the living room walls. Then I heard a noise to my left. I turned just as Sarah walked back into the living room, smiling. She was still wearing the high heels, the sapphire necklace, and now a sapphire ankle bracelet, and nothing else. I was lucky I hadn't picked up a drink from the bar because I would have dropped it for sure. "So, Nathan, tell me honestly," she asked, clearly rhetorical as she moved her arms and smoothly spun in a full circle. "Is this work of art more beautiful and dramatic than anything you've seen in marble or on canvas?" I was completely stunned, speechless and captivated by what I saw. There was no doubt Sarah's body was the most incredible I'd ever seen, whether in person or in any medium. She struck a pose, placing one foot in front of the other, bending her knees slightly and resting her hands on her hips. Then she grinned. "Well, what do you think of my masterpiece? Better than anything in the gallery, don't you think?" I muttered something like absolutely stunning, but given that my mind was in overdrive, I'm not entirely sure what I said. "One thing's for certain, it's way more exciting than anything you've ever come across before," she giggled, walking toward me. As she closed the distance, her smile grew even more self-assured. "I'm guessing that means you really like what you see. Art connoisseur," she teased with another giggle. To be honest, I can't fully explain how what happened next came to pass. Nor can I say exactly what was running through my mind. Was it purely physical desire? I don't know if thoughts of Emily crossed my mind. I don't know if I wondered why my calls were going straight to voicemail. I don't know if images of James flashed before me. I just don't know. I got up from my seat and slowly undressed, my eyes fixed on the most stunning piece of art I'd ever laid eyes on. I made Sarah comfortable on the couch. Then in one fluid motion, I immersed myself in her. It was clear she'd been anticipating this moment as much as I had. After we both caught our breath, we headed to the bedroom, though we didn't get much sleep that night. The next morning at 9 a.m., we sat down to a wonderful breakfast of blueberry pancakes and quiche. Sarah had cooked and served it at the table wearing nothing but an apron. As I ate, my brain finally started to kick back into gear after the whirlwind of the night before. Thoughts began to swirl in my head. Why hadn't Emily called me back? How lucky James was to have Sarah, though he didn't seem to appreciate the incredible woman right in front of him. And how I just had the most amazing experience of my life with someone I'd once viewed so negatively. If I didn't have an important mediation at 11 a.m., and given the need to go home and change out of my tuxedo, I would have stayed all morning. "Sarah, would you like to have dinner with me tonight? I think we need to talk about a few things," I said, getting up from the table. My stomach was now as satisfied as my libido. "I could cook us dinner here," she offered with a smile. "Let me take you out somewhere," I suggested. "Do you have the day off?" "You caught me," she laughed. "I have a flexible schedule, so I'm taking a day off. How about 6 p.m. then? I'll pick you up," she giggled. "I hope you can stay the night again." "That's one of the things we're going to discuss," I replied with a smile. Emily finally called me on my cell around 10:50 a.m., just as I was about to start the mediation I was leading. I told her I couldn't talk at the moment, but I didn't ask why she hadn't called me the night before. That seemed to put her at ease a bit. I asked her to call me later in the evening. Despite the lack of sleep, I performed exceptionally well during the mediation session. Maybe it was the lingering rush of endorphins still coursing through my veins. By 4 p.m., I had successfully brokered a deal that both parties were happy with. I even managed to take a hot shower and grab an hour's nap before heading out to pick up Sarah. When I arrived, Sarah was wearing a yellow sundress that looked like it was made just for her. She was in high spirits, slipping her arm around my shoulders as we walked to the car. As we pulled up to the restaurant, she giggled softly. Over dinner, we steered clear of talking about art. I was pleasantly surprised by how much she knew about music, tennis, and literature. She told me she had been a child prodigy on the violin, but her career was cut short after a serious injury. After recovering, she learned to play the piano but decided against pursuing a professional music career. Instead, she got into event planning in college and was now doing really well in that field. When we got back to her place, she squeezed my hand tightly as I walked her to the door. We still have a lot to talk about, things we couldn't discuss at the restaurant, she smiled. Then she laughed and added, "Come into my living room," said the spider to the fly. Once inside, she sat down next to me on the couch and took my hands in hers. "Nathan, I have to confess, I seduced you. I've wanted this for a long time, but I never had the chance until last night. Let me be completely honest. I want to get rid of James, and I want you, especially after last night. You rocked my world like no one else ever has." Once again, she left me speechless. I wasn't sure if my feelings for her, which had done a complete 180 degrees in just one day, were real or just a temporary infatuation. But I was eager to find out. "Can you take tomorrow off work?" I asked. "I'll do it if that's what you want," she chuckled. "Let's do another 24-hour compatibility check." That night we made love again and spent hours exploring each other's bodies. We discovered things about ourselves we didn't even know existed. My phone was on the whole time, but Emily never called. When Sarah and I finally parted ways late on Friday evening, I said, "I have a lot to think about." "What about you?" "I suppose I should have pretended to be at least a little conflicted," she chuckled. "But honestly, I don't have anything to think about. I just need to wait and see what you decide." When I got home early on Friday evening, Emily was already there. She had a look on her face that I couldn't quite read, something between deep thought, confusion, and maybe even a bit of fear. "Where have you been, honey?" "What's going on?" she asked. "I was at Sarah's place." "Oh, why?" "I think she's planning to end her marriage with James." "Did you talk to her about it?" "Yeah. By the way, I still haven't heard much from you about your trip. Did everything go okay?" "Oh, yeah, it was just really busy. I'm sorry, but everything went great. We secured the contract we're aiming for, so I'm sure Richard will be thrilled." "Listen, maybe we should have a talk about something." "You're right, but let's hold off until tomorrow." We spent the rest of the evening chatting over dinner, watching a movie on Netflix. When we went to bed, we made love with a passion I could hardly remember ever feeling before. The difference between being with Emily and how things were with Sarah couldn't have been more stark. On Saturday morning, I went for a 30-mile bike ride while Emily headed to her fitness club. We met back at home for lunch, took a shower, and then sat down together. Uh, Something happened while I was away," she started. "Yeah," I chuckled. "Of course." The next 4 months were some of the most emotionally turbulent of my life. But in a way, it brought Sarah and me closer than ever before. Emily and James seemed to waver between trying to fix their relationships and deciding to end their marriages. But Sarah and I put an end to the back and forth by renting an apartment together. We moved in 6 weeks after that conversation. As soon as the divorces were finalized and Emily and James bought out our shares of the houses, Sarah and I bought a place together. We got married not long after. I don't know about Emily and James, but I've never looked back. Now, 3 years after that fateful night at the Gardner Museum, I'm still living the dream. Every night I get to hold the most beautiful work of art I've ever known, and I couldn't be happier. And